Welcome back, aliens. This is Navin Reddy from Telusko Learnings, and in this video we'll talk about wrapper classes. So wrapper classes has been there from Java 1. Java the first version, which is 1.0, and in this we have two more concepts introduced, which is auto boxing and auto unboxing in 1.5. Now before, when talk about Java, Java is purely object oriented, right? But in Java also we use this primitive values, which is int, float, and double. So this all thing which comes from C programming and C++, or C programming, which is procedure, right? So if you are using this thing, which is primitive data types, so this is not objects, right? This, if you create int I, so this is not object, this is values, right? So what we want now, we want to use objects. So let's say if you want to store a value 5, you have to use objects. So instead of storing into int value, you have to use a class of which you'll be getting object. So for every primitive value, we have a class. So for int, we have integer. For float, we have float. For double, we have double. So these are all classes, right? So this is primitive data types, and these are classes. For char, we have character. Right, so for every primitive data type, we have a class here. Now, so how can you store the values here? So we can simply say, let's say we have int I equal to 5. So the value of I here is 5. Let me create an integer object. I will say this as I. So that's my variable name. So we have integer I, and we can say new integer, and you can pass the value 5. Now both this I and 5, they have the same value, which is 5, right? But this is an object here, and this is a simple value. And Java says everything should be an object, right? That's why this is an object here. So instead of using int, we should always use integer, right? Instead of passing 5, we can also pass also pass I, which is the variable here. So we are passing this variable I here, right? So this concept of putting your primitive value inside an object is called as boxing. Okay, and from 1.5 we can also write integer I equal to, or let's name it as jj equal to I, right? So we can directly assign a primitive value to the integer object, and this is also boxing, but this boxing is called as, since it is automatically doing that stuff for you, the Java compiler, it is called as auto boxing. So this stuff here, this is boxing, and this is auto boxing, right? So it's that simple. We can use it with anything. We can use it with float, double, and character, right? Now let's say when we are assigning a value of int to integer, this is called as boxing, right? What if we have a new variable which is j here, and the value of j will be coming from jj? So we can say jj dot. So to fetch the value, we can simply say int value. Okay, so when you say int value, it will fetch the integer value or the int value of jj, right? Because this int returns the value int here, right? So it returns the data type int. Sounds good? So this concept of getting the primitive value from the object is called as unboxing. So instead of this, we can also directly write, let's say we have int k equal to jj. So we are assigning a value of an object, which is an integer object, right, to the value which is k, which is primitive. Any guess? Yes, this is auto unboxing. Okay, so this is auto unboxing. Now question arises, where we will be using this concept of boxing, auto boxing, primitive wrapper classes. So let's say you're working with a collection. So if you have not seen collection, it's very simple. We have a list of values. So let's say I'm creating an array list of values. So we'll say this is values equal to new array list, right? And then we can assign values to this array list. We can just import the package. We can directly assign values to this list. We can say values.add, we can add 5. Right, we can add let's say 7, right? So for us, this is int values, right? So 5 is int value, 7 is int value, so this is int type. And we can also add, we can say add let's say Navin. Now I don't want this list of values should have Navin. It should only have the numbers. So 5 should be supported, 7 should be supported, but it should not support this string here. For that, we have a concept of collection and generics called as generic specifically, and we have to specify the type of value you want to work with. So let's say if I specify int, so I want in both the end we have to specify int. So this array list will only support int values now. But hold on, there's a syntactical problem here. It says it is a wrong syntax. It's because this array list only works with integer class, because if you want to talk about the latest frameworks, they only work with the classes, not with the primitive values. So this array says, okay, it will only support integer values. That means this 5 is an integer value. But hold on, we are not writing new integer, right? We are not writing this way. That means it is boxing the value using auto boxing concept. Okay, and we can also fetch the value with the help of auto unboxing. So wrapper classes are widely used whenever you want to work with collection framework or advanced frameworks. Okay, so if the question is, should we use wrapper classes? Yes, whenever you work with frameworks, you should use wrapper classes. But hold on, let's say you want to only work with some variable. Let's say we want to use a for loop, right? So let's say we want to use a for loop. So should I write integer counter equal to 0, or should I write int here? So what should be better? And the answer is int, because the processing of int is much faster than processing of integer, because int is primitive and integer is a class. So when to use integer? When you work with frameworks. When to use int? When you're working with loops, where you want speed than the features. So that's it from wrapper classes. So it is wrapper, unwrapping, boxing, unboxing, and all those stuff. So thanks so much for watching, and do subscribe for further videos. So this is a class, as you can see, this is a class here, right? And this class, integer, extends a number class. So number class act as a superclass for this. Again, we'll talk about this, why we need a superclass like number. And yeah, so in this class you can see we have lots of constants available. There are lots of methods also. Example, toString method. Again, we'll be saying that in some time. We have toString method. Then we also have a method which we normally use, is called as parseInt. Can you see that we got a method which is parseInt, which takes a string. Again, we'll see why we need this class later, why we need this method later. But we do have that method which is parseInt, which takes a string object and it returns int value. Now, once we know wrapper classes, how many wrapper classes we have? We have int, we have double, we have char, we have all the stuff. You can try it out. In fact, we have one more method. Example, in wrapper class, let's say we have a string str, and in this str I have a number. I have 1 2 3, but it is in the format of string. We have 1 2 3, but it's in string format. I want the integer value of it, so I will say int n equal to. Can I assign str? And the answer is no, right? Is because str is a string and you cannot assign the value to int, because even if it is number, it is enclosed in these double quotes, right? So it will not work. So we have to convert that string into integer. So what we can do is we can use a method called as parseInt. So parseInt is a method which takes a string, it returns an integer value. The only thing is parseInt method is it's a static method. So to access that, we need to use class name, which is integer.parseInt. So we can say integer.parseInt, and you can pass str. It will take that number as a string format and it will give you the actual number, which is 1 2 3. And if I try to print that, we'll say n, it works. So that is one of the use of parseInt method. You can see the output here. So that's one of the method. One of the use of parseInt method, which belongs to integer class. So that's it. We have talked about wrapper classes. In the next video, we'll talk about abstract classes.